Now, our first session for the day, you will see how the most iconic stages in the world has adapted its digital fundraising throughout the crisis to ensure a sustainable future.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today. I'm Louise from Enthuse. I'm the marketing director. So Enthuse is a platform where we help charities raise more for their cause through digital donations, event registration, fundraising solutions. We're working with 4,000 of charities in the UK. And one of those incredible charities that we're really happy to be partnering with is the Royal Opera House. I'm really pleased to be joined by Lauren today. Hello, Lauren.
Hello, thanks, Louise. I'm fundraising manager at the Royal Opera House, and my team and I run the fundraising campaigns. Okay.
Cool. So I'm really excited to be here today, Lauren. So we're going to talk a lot about the kind of donation journey that you've set up at the Royal Opera House and use some real examples of how you've optimised the donor journey. And I thought we'd just kick off actually by talking through some donor insights to give a little bit of context. So at MTUs, we've been running what we call Donor Pulse. So this is a quarterly insight study where we survey over 1,000 British citizens and we ask them about their attitudes to giving, and we're tracking how that's actually changing throughout the crisis. So if we move on, we can just see some of the kind of core findings that we discovered in the latest version of Donor Pulse. So I think first thing to recognise, if we just go back one slide, please, is that donations are shifting online. This might seem obvious, but obviously COVID has actually fast-tracked the digital revolution. We're seeing more and more supporters give more online. And actually, when we first started this survey at the start of the crisis, we found about 35% of people claimed that they had donated online. And when we moved on to the next quarterly edition of the survey, which was conducted in October, we found that 42% of the general public has actually made a digital donation online. So that is really increasing. And I know it's really interesting, Lauren, when we look at the Royal Opera House, it's something that you've kind of invested in fairly recently. So it'd be good to understand your journey, how you decided to kind of invest in digital donations and how it's been going so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So we check on Enthuse at the start of and sort of in response to the pandemic. We were recognizing the need to be more digital for obvious reasons, and so we needed a more user-friendly, more robust platform. Prior to that, frankly, we didn't put a lot of priority on online giving. We didn't promote it a whole lot, and unsurprisingly, that meant we saw a very small portion of our appeals donation revenue coming from online. In fact, it was only something like 2%, so quite small. And since the switch in the start of the pandemic, we've increased, the use of digital promotion for online giving. We've increased email outreach. We've partnered with our audiences and media team to do some social promotion. We've even got some messaging on the outside of the building, which has a QR code that takes you to the donations page. Some things along those lines. And since the increased promotion and all this improvement online, online gifts make up about 30% of our appeals donation revenue, which is amazing.
Oh, that's incredible. What a shift. And I love the marketing campaigns that you're running. Actually, an early memory from lockdown was sitting watching live performances being streamed, and the whole campaign that you have around from our house to your house. I think it's really helped people throughout the crisis and join that experience and sit there in their living rooms with a glass of Prosecco, settle down for the evenings. It's a wonderful brand. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we move to the next slide. We'll just go through one of the next survey findings, which I think is really interesting. So naturally, as you'd assume, a lot of younger people are used to dating online. It's hardly surprising. They're used to use social media platforms. They're digital natives. They've grown up in online. They've never known a world without mobile phones, right? So that's really interesting. But I think it's also interesting, right, that older people are becoming more au fait with giving online. They're becoming more comfortable as grandparents talk to their children, grandchildren on Zoom, right? They're becoming more familiar with digital technology. So I think it's interesting when we ran the survey that we found actually, up to a third of 55 to 64-year-olds are actually using online platforms to donate. And Lauren, I just wondered how this mapped back to your supporter base, and how you finding the demographic of the Royal Opera House. How are they donating? Have you spotted any trends at all?
Yeah, at the start of all of this, we weren't sure what to expect. We probably couldn't have predicted the massive increase we saw online, but we were very hopeful. And we found that both older and younger donors have been more enticed to give to us online, which has been great. As you mentioned, we did some free online streaming in the summer, and now we have some pay-per-view online streaming options. We've been promoting online giving through those, and they have attracted a wider audience. It's been helpful for people for accessibility reasons who can't make it into the theater, people who just live too far away, and a whole wealth of reasons in between. And so we've seen a similar change in our donor audience, which has been really wonderful. And so not only have we seen a range of ages, but we've also seen a range of locations. I mean, people from all over the UK are giving, as well as there's been a great increase in international gifts, which we wouldn't normally have seen without this more switch to digital, which has been really wonderful. Yeah.
No, that's great. I think it's been one of the good things that actually come out of the crisis is
maybe one of the only good
accessibility of exactly of virtual events as well, right? Getting more people from outside of London. I know this has been a big trend in the sector, but if we move on to the next slide, I think one of the things that's interesting about donating online is that it can feel or risk being uninspiring or quite generic. You do it quite quickly, and actually when we do the survey, we found that a lot of people can't actually remember the name of the charity that they last donated to, which is really upsetting for charities, because they're trying to capture the spirit of their cause and build memory cells with net new donors, that they go on and become repeat donors. So I thought that study was really interesting. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see some of the reasons behind that. So we kind of batch them together, right? So part of it is about it's quite frictionless. You can do things very quickly online. People want to give to a type of cause, so perhaps the art, but they don't necessarily always think about the specific charity. That's one of the reasons. Sometimes it's that charities can, or donors at least, some donors feel that they look and sound the same. So that's one thing to be aware of. I think it's really important that charities think about their core brand assets. And I think with Royal Opera House, it's such an iconic and famous brand that people remember that red. They remember your logo. So it's really important that you have your brand attributes front and center of everything that you're doing within the donor journey. And I think it's really important and to use that we are kind of a small signal trust at the point of transaction, that the consumer knows that their money is being processed safely. It's not for us to be kind of the star of the show. We want the cause to be in the limelight. And I think also there's a certain element of people sometimes, donate to a cause that's pertinent to a friend. So perhaps not as important to them, but it's still important to capture their attention so that you can market to them in the future, right? So if we move to the next slide, I think it'd be really interesting to talk through how you've tackled some of these potential issues and how you've approached your donation page, which I think is absolutely fabulous. We look at this image, it's so striking. How did you land on this image, and what was your thought process around those brand assets?
Yeah, I mean, imagery, especially recently, is incredibly important. You need to connect with your donors, and if the only way you can connect with them is virtually, images are going to be just the first thing they see. And also, I mean, if English is someone's second language, the image needs to speak to them. So we've actually tried a couple of different images in this particular location you're showing. One starting that was kind of moving and a bit more somber, showing a lone performer in the empty auditorium. And then we have something really joyful like this, showing, live performance. You can see, look on Marianella's face, she's just so happy. And for me personally, and what we found with talking to some user surveys that we did, ballet and opera and performance of any kind really can provide a transformative experience, and that's why people love it. It can provide us with a bit of an escape from what's going on, and right now I think we all need to escape. And I think it's important to remember that and how it feels, and I think images like this do it beautifully. And so we're really trying to move more towards that optimistic, nostalgic, we'll be back one of these days, hopefully soon kind of imagery. So yeah.
Yeah, it's such a striking image, such a clear call to action. The contrast between the text and the black background is really, really clear. And yeah, it does feel uplifting and happy. It's really, really striking and beautiful, and people will remember that when they donate. It's really important. So just moving on, if we think about the next stage in the donor journey, we go through to kind of impact statements and where the donations were going. And I know you've thought very carefully about this, haven't you, and how it actually fits into the overall marketing mix as well.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, ensuring there's some sort of strap line people can identify with, so they know what we're doing without having to read too much text. We went with Support the Future of Live Performance. It meant a lot to us, but it also, another thing that we tested, it didn't resonate with others. It was fairly clear what we need there. And if you look a little bit further down the text where you see the red arrow there, we're kind of talking about, X amount can help us by Y. In this case, because we're talking about a recovery campaign, which has been, our core the past several months, is talking about PPE. People don't realize that and maybe they do realize, but pointing out the fact that it costs quite a bit extra to keep not only them safe when and if they're back in the building and watching performances, but also our performers, our staff, our security team, and all of those very important people that make everything happen from day to day. So just pointing that out makes things feel a bit more tangible, which is always nice.
Yeah, that's lovely. I was on your Twitter feed the other day and I saw this beautiful, just 6-second rather, video clip of two ballerinas and they're spinning and they had these face masks on. It's such a striking image in my mind. I didn't think about that, but of course that they need to be protected in what they're doing as well.
Yeah, I mean, if the 2 times I've been in the building for quick things, if you walk by a studio when they were practicing in the building, they're doing full, performances with their little bubble in masks. It's challenging from day to day to be a professional performer anyway, but doing it in a mask is takes it to another level of impressive. It's very interesting.
That's incredible. I can barely walk very far in a mask, I must admit. It's a new world for all of us. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Let's talk about brand color, right? Because actually it's sometimes really small finishing touches that can make the overall experience so impactful. So we think very carefully about the branding on the donation forms themselves. So it'd be good to talk a little bit about that. But I know also when we talked before, you've talked about how important that message of support is to staff and performers and how it's keeping them going through these uncertain times.
Yeah, I mean, so making sure everything felt like Royal Opera House throughout the checkout process was important to us as a team, but also I think it's been important to our donors because there's a lot of hesitancy, as you said. I mean, the grandparents of the world and older people of the world are getting more and more comfortable with technology. But if this looked entirely different and say it was in enthused orange, and well, it's beautiful, I think it would definitely cause some disconnect. But doing this and then also adding that section at the end that you mentioned about share a message of support has been amazing. So not only does it make the donation process feel a bit nicer to the donor because it's, share your memories with us. Why are you doing this? Is this in honor of someone? Is it just because you watched something that moved you to the point where you want to give us a gift? It makes it feel like a more personal, it's a much nicer experience. And then from the Royal Opera House standpoint, in the beginning of this pandemic, we actually were using it as internal staff motivation. So I was sending it to my colleagues in my department from time to time, whether we were really stressed or if we hit a specific milestone, just to show, it's been hard work, but it's really worth it. And we also, the ballet company, we're sending the some of these quotes that were specific to the ballet company, sending on in like a newsletter to the dancers, which, I mean, they really don't see this from the donors ever there. And they were missing being on stage. They were missing rehearsing with one another. They were in their kitchens and their living rooms and wherever else trying to perform. And it really helped, give them a bit of light and motivation to keep going. And another little thing, if you can see, I know that the text is small, we added a little disclaimer saying we may use this message in marketing promotions, and please let us know if you'd rather we did not do so. And so we've used it in our members magazine, in some emails, on social media, and we've even used it in some board reports to kind of drive some messaging home. So it's just been one of those surprisingly invaluable tools to us and to our donors. So yeah, it's been really wonderful.
Oh yeah, that's really lovely to hear. Just thinking it's kind of like a live applause, right? It's getting that moment back to the performers. It's really lovely.
Absolutely.
And if we just move to the next slide, I know you do a lot of testing, right, and optimization, and look at the data. Sometimes data can throw up like surprising findings, right? So there's quite standard advice around donations forms about having suggested amounts of donations, about pricing of donations being in ascending order. There's been a lot of experiments around this. We thought it would be good to kind of test that assumption and see whether we could optimize the donations that you were getting even further. Do you want to talk a little bit about the process?
Yeah, and I think this exact example that I'll talk through in a second is a perfect case study as to why you always need to test more than once, and you can't make any assumptions about your audience. So, as I said, we really didn't do a whole lot on the digital side of things prior to this. I mean, we did some, but we were missing a lot of testing. We needed the learnings, we needed the data, and so partnered with Enthuse, which was so helpful because we needed this information before we launched a big recovery campaign. So we did this in September. The campaign launched in October. We did the typical test Louise mentioned, and one of the analysts at Enthuse was really wise in looking at the data carefully and noticed that more people than average were actually using that write-in amount. And it wasn't just any custom amount like, £5 or something along those lines. There were actually really healthy higher amounts. So we did the test of a descending order versus, the open fill-in blank. So in running that test, the suggested amounts versus the kind of blank custom fill-in amount, we found that the average donation value was higher in doing so. And so that's what we use for the duration of our recovery campaign. And we've seen some really great results. So that was a great surprise. We were really, really glad to have been able to do that test.
Oh, brilliant. It's always good to look at that data, isn't it, and challenge our assumptions. I do that a lot. I have an emotional feeling about something, and then I look at the data and think, oh, actually, the data's telling a completely different story. So we go to the next slide. I think we can just view like a quick summary of the testing that we did, and it's great to see that it led to an increase in the average donation value as well. So the lesson here is like there are kind of standard examples in behavioral marketing science, but always test it specifically for your cause as well, because what might work for Royal Opera House may be very different for different types of charities, different size charities, also dependent on the supporter base that they have as well. So if we go to next slide. Thank you pages. Let's talk about this, because actually I didn't include this in the first draft of the deck, and I really should have done, because I remember you saying to me, oh, but the thank you, that's the most important part, that's when it all comes alive. So yeah, this is an example of kind of the branded and customized thank you page email that the donor will receive. What was your kind of approach to this, the tone and the language that you use as well?
Yeah, I mean, we found that thanking and staying in touch with our donors has been super important, both for new donors and return donors. So the new donors, we of course want to hang on to them long after we even know what coronavirus even was. hopefully we forget that anyway. But you know, our return donors, especially those who are members, they're used to being in regularly. Some of them live alone, and this was like their big point of social contact. So contrary to maybe how people might normally feel, they've been really appreciative of our increased email outreach and other types of communications. So making sure that this thank you message was thoughtful, genuine, and immediate, basically, has been so helpful. It's not only helped us keep in touch, but it also has allowed us to drive our messaging home. It's super easy to change, and we've changed it a couple times depending on our messaging, but especially when lockdowns kept changing and all of that stuff, it also gave a sense of security to the donors. Okay, this really wasn't donation to the Royal Opera House. It actually went through. I'm not used to, you know, making a transaction online, but now I have this receipt that reminds me. And then, wow, this is such a nice message from, say it was Tony Papano at one point, and then another time we had the director of development. We've had a few different voices speak up, just so that, again, it didn't feel super generic, and it matched what we were showing on the site or the current status of the country. And that, along with all of our other comms, have just been really great, and it makes a difference to both the donors and to us. So good thing to add in, Louise. So thanks for doing that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I hadn't actually thought about it from the perspective of, you know, some supporters actually being fairly lonely during this time and getting an email kind of inspiring them. That's really lovely and great that you're using like a range of people within the organisation to connect and in a really personal way online. I think it's really critical. Just aware that we want to have some time for questions. So just to summarise, and thank you so much, Lauren. I know how incredibly busy you are, and it's really, really important that we share these learnings with other charities. So thanks for taking the time. But just in summary, you know, digital transformation has really rapidly accelerated, as we all know. Giving online can feel intangible, it can feel uninspiring, but there are techniques out there to help you to really engage with your supporter base. We think it's really important that the fundraising platform is signal trust, not the star of the show. That's because 1 in 3 donors can't remember who they last donated to. So be sure to really thoughtfully think about your supporter base, the tone that you use, the assets, the photography, so that you have the spirit of the cause coming throughout everything that you're doing online, and that it's consistent with everything else that you're doing. And of course, experimentation, that is a big part of digital, and that's the beauty of digital, is that you can be A/B testing lots of different things and finding good results. So thank you very much. We move to the next slide. Just a couple of things that you can do next. Of course, we're here for the Q&A, but if you want to support this amazing charity, obviously go and check out the donation page. Here's the link here. It's good. It's a great example to look at anyway. It's one of the best in class practices. Also on the Enthuse website, and there's a link here, you can actually set up your own branded and customized donations page by plugging in your charity name. It's a really cool recent development that we've done. And of course, you're interested, then go on, book a demo and see what we could do for the cause. But now I think we're going to hand over and take some questions.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Louise and Lauren, for this very insightful presentation. Good morning to both of you.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Hope you're well. Yeah.
Good.
Fine. Although the sunshine's gone, it's started to rain.
Yeah, I think it's the same over here in London. But yeah, great. Well, thank you very much. And we have quite a few questions already. So why don't we start? The first one is from Hannah Mason. She is asking whether you, Lauren, have looked into follow-up journeys for supporters who make a one-off donation, and whether they were receiving a welcome journey.
Yeah, so at the moment we don't have an automated welcome journey, but we do carefully steward them, mainly through a lot of thanking, and we do loop them into our direct mail messages. I mean, so far we've only had the one back in the fall, but we have future plans for that. But we are starting to look at more automated kind of CRM-based email journeys and things along those lines. So I think it's incredibly important, but acknowledging that they've taken kind of that next step to go from whether they were just an audience member or casual observer or pay-per-view online streaming watcher, and they've progressed on to becoming a donor, acknowledging that explicitly in any communications we send them has been really successful. And we're working on an analysis to see exactly how successful, but it's gone really well for us. So yeah, great question. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Just a reminder for everybody, our Louise and Lauren will stay up until 9:35, and then they'll hop over to our remote platform. So if you have any question, you can also ask there. I'll hop over to the next one from Tim, asking, how does the data you gave us through the Enthuse platform get into the CRM database? Is there a direct integration or is it a manual import?
At the moment, I'll call it a hybrid. We have some brilliant people over at the ROH that helped us come up with a weekly way of semi-automatically importing, but that was something that we set up on our end, and it goes into our CRM so that we can report easily through our CRM, but also Enthuse has a really robust database that if I need quick numbers, I can just go in there and either download through Excel or just see their dashboard for quick stats, just so that we know how things are going.
Got you. Brilliant. Super. So next question from Nathan Stillwell. And he's asking, how often do you make donation requests on social media, and whether there are any special messaging that led to significant results?
Social media is something we're still experimenting with. We definitely, we have a kind of a recovery campaign committee that includes, members of our social media team. We've only done a couple of requests so far, and with mixed results. We try to couple the social media posts with an email or something along those lines, so it kind of like is bolstered by that additional communication. We have additional plans in the future for, other iterations of recovery fundraising, but so yeah, I'd say mixed results. We still have more to learn, but we're working on it.
Okay, got you. Got you. Okay. Right. So moving on to the next question from Tim. Did the Enthuse platform replace an existing online donation process through your website? And if so, what made you switch and what made you choose Enthuse?
Sure. We had an internal kind of solution, and we were at the end of this, or at the beginning of the pandemic, we're in the process of switching our website over to a new version and totally revamping it. And in doing that, we just discovered the general usability of that internal solution wasn't super stable, basically. And so we needed something else so that we could handle hopefully with higher volume, which did happen to be the case, make sure it was user friendly, make sure it was mobile friendly, and all of those things. And so I had heard about Enthuse in the past, and so I looked into them and a few others, and because we wanted to make sure it felt like Royal Opera House, seamless kind of transition, it stayed on brand, it didn't dilute our brand or anything along those lines. We saw that they had a great option to, put an iframe right in your web page, make sure you have, branded thanking and all of the things that we would need. And they just fit perfectly. And they were easily integrated like pretty quickly as well, which was, speed was key at the time. So
Great. Yeah. Understand. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and actually that leads me to the other question from Kevin Taylor. At what point did Royal Opera House launch the emergency and recovery campaign? And is there an exit strategy? And if so, how and when?
Yeah. So we started fundraising right away. Basically, we had varying messaging on our website via email when we were announcing cancellations. People were able to cancel tickets and things along those lines. We had messaging in our free streaming. We were kind of doing ad hoc general messaging. But then we moved on from there to, finally regroup and create a proper campaign. And I guess the official campaign launched in September and ran in full steam ahead through December. We're looking at future iterations, but still have yet to have a super solid plan. And while we don't necessarily have an exit strategy as of yet, I mean, we have targets and goals in mind to make sure that we can sustainably operate. And we also need to learn a lot more, namely when we can open, at what capacity, and what's the willingness of our attendees to come back. How do ticket sales do? So there's a lot of dependencies before we will have a strong exit strategy.
It's just,
But
yeah, exactly.
we're working on it.
Well, that's great. We have time for one more question, and Kevin as well, who is asking a bit more detail around the two online donation options. So the given amount versus the empty box option for donation. If you could clarify these two for Kevin, why why these two?
Sure. So the options, we had a descending order. So I believe, and I apologize if I can't remember the middle amount. I think it was 100 pounds, 50 pounds, and then 20 pounds. Thank you. And then it was just a blank fill in there. I think hopefully that answers.
That's right. I've just re-looked at the slide. It's 100, 50, 20 versus just a blank box, literally.
And those amounts were based on what we were seeing people commonly give historically.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Super. Well, great. I mean, thank you so much, both of you, for your time. Sorry, we haven't been able to answer all the questions. We received quite a few. It's been really a hit with our audience. So thank you very much, Louise and Lauren, for your time. It's been a very, very interesting and very insightful presentation, and we wish all the best to the Royal Opera House for the future.